In the climate crisis, China is both hero and villain. Its staggering economic rise has been built on dirty development. China is dependent on coal, and today it's the biggest polluter in the world, responsible for nearly a third of all carbon emissions. We have evidence that coal power plants, supposedly cancelled, are once again under construction. But the country is also the biggest global investor in renewable energy. The Chinese Communist Party has thrown its mighty weight behind green technologies, bringing down costs for everyone. So much so that some wonder whether only an authoritarian government, one unbothered by the debate and delays of democracy, can meet the challenge of climate change. Gansu Province, northwest China. The old Silk Road ran through the valleys below these mountains. Now it's the front line for climate change in China. Zhou Duoxiao has been a shepherd here for nearly 20 years. Zhou lives and works right under the shadow of these mountains. There are so many glaciers in Central Asia that they're known as the third pole after the north and south, but they're retreating fast. These photos show the rate of change since 2001. Millions of people depend on the fresh water these glaciers contain. This is where the threat to those glaciers lies, more than 1,300 miles east in Hebei province. China's vast industry runs mainly on carbon, in particular coal, one of the dirtiest fuels around. China today emits more carbon than the US and Europe combined. Painted on trees is about as green as it gets. That over-reliance on fossil fuel created an air pollution crisis. Its cities choked by smog, its citizens increasingly unhappy. The Communist Party pledged drastic action.
As a response, about 15 years ago, China established a renewable energy law. It had a much greater focus on how does it develop wind and solar energy, clean energy that doesn't have air pollution, that doesn't have carbon emissions. It went from basically nothing or very little wind, very little solar, to really dominating the world in both of those industries, and now also electric vehicles.
To cut down on coal, Beijing ordered its provinces to cancel or halt construction on coal power plants. But building has resumed. These recent satellite images show work resuming on coal plants across the country, apparently in violation of central government restrictions. This new data, provided exclusively to Sky News by Global Energy Monitor, an NGO, shows that nearly half of all postponed or cancelled projects are back in action. But I also wanted to understand the other side of the story. Air pollution has decreased dramatically, and China's three green solutions, wind, solar and electric vehicles, could have an even more significant global impact on climate change. They're scattered across different corners of China. Here, at the edge of the Gobi Desert, state intervention has been undeniably effective. From a long way behind, China now has the largest wind capacity of any country on the planet. This area constitutes the biggest wind farm in the world. I visited one section, run by a state-owned company. And what better way to see it than climbing 60 meters straight up? Last year alone, China installed the equivalent of one large wind turbine every 62 minutes.
It's quite a tiring climb to get up here, but once you do get up here, you get a sense of the sheer scale. There are hundreds of these turbines, there are thousands more across Gansu, and there are scores of wind parks all across China. It's probably the only country where you can give such a big effort to renewable wind energy.
All under the watchful guidance of the party.
目前来说，风电和光伏、光热的这个成本还是比煤电要稍微高一点，但是它的这个价格呢，正在逐渐的走低。随着技术的成熟，还有咱们各种这个材料的这个国产化，价格是逐步降低的。
This region is the poster boy for wind power in China. But even here, for all the huge investment, wind still doesn't generate as much power as fossil fuel stations. The Ordos Desert in Inner Mongolia. The empty dunes have been filled with solar panels. Again, China is dominating this industry. It is both the largest producer and installer of photovoltaic cells worldwide. Its total solar capacity, with all its farms running, would be enough to power the whole of the UK 3 times over. And China's support for solar manufacturers has brought massive cost reductions for everyone around the world. Cutting-edge technology can also breathe new life into age-old practices. Yang moved here last May.
那边就是也是种地打工，种地那面呢土地就有结了也结化，那面土地种地不挣钱，就打工挣钱。绿化灯白上发电，白下药鸡啊，我又能药着又能种着。
China is putting its deserts to work in other ways too. Over the last 20 years, a private company called Elion, backed up with heavy government incentives, has transformed these barren sands into a vast oasis. It is a great green wall, built as a barrier against desertification. A phenomenon that itself contributes about 4% of all carbon emissions. The next stage of greening the desert is an experimental technique, using drones to scatter specially designed seeds across dunes.
So this shows you the effects of adding trees. 1988 at the top there, that's where the dune used to stand. And you can see it's been coming down. And it's also been coming down more quickly the more trees that are put here.
To have an impact on climate change, energy generation needs to change, but so does our consumption. That means heading to the city. China's development over the last 40 years has been extraordinarily rapid. With it, the mass migration of hundreds of millions of people from the countryside to urban areas. Shanghai is a sleek, thoroughly modern marvel. But 85% of all China's CO2 emissions come from cities. What the world needs instead is more moments like this. A couple from China's new, massive middle class buying their first electric vehicle. And not because the environment is their main concern.
The brand is quite new, but it's a fancy one, yeah, because of the design and also the new technology.
China's huge effort in electric vehicles is already paying off. In total last year, more than 1 million were sold in China, more than the rest of the world put together.
So China's role is really important. China is the largest auto market in the world, and it has been for several years. The scale and volume that China can bring to the market is having a huge effect on the supply chain. So it's hammering down battery costs, it's hammering down component costs, and its rules are forcing automakers to invest in electrification probably much sooner than they would have without China.
There are a staggering 486 electric vehicle startups registered in China. One of the more established is called NIO. Their cars are made in this factory. It's benefited from close ties to the Chinese government.
We started this project 4 years ago, and at that time...
William Li is its billionaire founder, dubbed China's Elon Musk.
I don't think we should ask the users to buy the cars because of climate change. That's not fair. So better product and more users like your products and service, and then that can help climate change. So that's my thinking. Yes.
What the Communist Party has achieved in renewables is truly remarkable. But it is a complicated hero with its own self-interested calculations. Because this is also a blueprint to dominate the industries of the future.
It very much is an economic calculation. You know, these are strategic emerging industries, that's the name for these kinds of industries within China. They know that renewables are going to be a bigger and bigger part of the future. electric vehicles are going to become commonplace. So they want to get their enterprises, their companies, to be dominant in those markets.
But the authoritarianism that allows the party to mobilize huge resources without the niceties of public debate can also be a weakness. The lack of transparency built into the political system means even the central government can't trust local data. That means you need to see the reality on the ground. I travelled to Yulin in northern China. This is China's dirty energy secret, the part of the country it doesn't want you to see. We were followed by unmarked cars while we investigated. The business here is coal, and business is still good, even for small yards like this one.
总体觉得这个市场还可以，能卖上价钱，挣钱都是煤矿这里钱，我这儿挣不了钱。
Renewables today only account for 22% of China's energy consumption. 59% still comes from coal. Unless China can wean itself off coal, all its investments in renewables may as well be for nothing. The signs are not promising.
Behind me is a brand new coal mine. It's just started running. And for all the fine words of the communist leadership, for the massive amounts of money they are spending on renewables, coal remains the backbone of China's industrial economy, and it will be for some time to come.
This is a critical moment for China and the world. No country can make a bigger impact on climate change. But China cannot have it both ways forever. The halo of its huge renewable investment isn't bright enough to obscure the dirty reality of its dependence on coal. Hero, villain, sooner, not later, China must decide.